Welcome back to Previously Prohibited. I'm here with my co-host Mel, and today we have a very special guest, Matthew Ghobrial Cockerill. I hope I said that correctly. A little bit incorrectly.
He'll be Matt for the interview. Don't worry about
Matt, yeah. Matt is a researcher and PhD student in history, and he teaches at the London School of Economics and runs the social media platform History Speaks. And he also has a JD from the University of Chicago. And Matthew has done some really incredible work around the civilian death toll in Gaza and sort of analyzing how that relates to claims of what type of war crimes Israel is committing, whether Israel is committing war crimes and what type. And I will say he's been very, very cautious. He's very careful about using inflammatory terms like genocide. And we had him on here because he sort of decided to reassess his previous position that what Israel is doing in Gaza isn't a genocide, even though there are a lot of war crimes involved. He's changed his mind. And so I wanted to talk about what changed his mind and, sort of his evolution to this position. So welcome, Matthew.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you.
Real quick, Matt, give us the background. Where I know you've talked about is your family there Egyptian, Christian?
Yeah.
Okay, so you
my
have a
father
connection to the region.
I do, yeah. I know Arabic. My household was three out of four. My father's a white guy from Nebraska. My mother's a Coptic Egyptian, and our grandparents lived with or like right next door to us virtually for most of my childhood. So yeah, I did have a connection to the region, and I would say that I came into this with a more pro-Palestine position than certainly pro-Israel, considerably, but also some skepticism of the more extreme charges made against Israel. Like when the war started, I didn't support Israel or funding Israel because of the military history of Israel, of which I'm very skeptical and critical, and also because of these kind of bone-chilling statements that were made by Israeli officials. But I tweeted, for example, as well, there's no comparing Israel and Hamas. Israel does not target civilians as Hamas did on October 7th. And that's one.
Well, we thought so.
Yeah, no, that's one tweet I would, in terms of the Israel side of it, I would certainly regret and think I was wrong on today.
Can you say give a couple examples of the bone-chilling statements?
Yeah. For example, Israel Katz, who is now the defense minister of Israel, said of Gazan civilians, we're not talking about, he specifically mentioned civilians. He said they will not have another drop of water or a single battery until they leave the world. This is a high-level official. Of course, Yoav Galan, I think everybody knows he talked of Gazans. People say he was talking about Hamas, but I think it's clear from the context of cutting off food, water, medicine, which is for everyone, not just Hamas, calling them human animals. The head of Kogat called Gazans, he clearly talking about civilians, human beasts. So there are many such statements, but my impression at the time still was that they're going to commit war crimes. They're not going to take care to protect civilian life. We have to oppose this, but I didn't think they'd actually intentionally kill children, for example, which I believe I'm virtually certain they have.
Real quick, let's start with now. You were asked to peer review a paper, correct? And who was it from?
Yeah, so the report was I was one of many peer reviewers for Air Wars, and the report was of fatalities in October 2023.
Okay.
And I'll just mention this, October 2023, just through my own demographics research, was how I had initially concluded Israel had intentionally killed, or at least committed murder under the laws of war, which if you're totally disregarding civilian life, if you're engaged in what's called, as Jenin will know as a lawyer, reckless disregard for civilian life, you just don't care, that's also murder under the laws of war. And I can, just based on the demographics of the dead from the October 2023 bombing, I already concluded by May of 2024 that they had committed murder. But the Air Wars study still completely shocked me. It still shocked me. Even as somebody who thought they had engaged in murder by then, I was utterly shocked and baffled when I read their data.
So walk us through like a summary of what the paper found.
The paper found that in October 2023, Israel was systematically bombing residences, unmilitarized residences, full of multi-generational Arab families. Like, I mean, I'm just half Egyptian, but remind me of my family, frankly, because our grandparents live with us, and killing everyone in the family with dumb bombs. And getting
what do you say when? Sorry, what do you say when people say, "Well, Hamas is under there," or they're Hamas people in the buildings? What's the response to that?
well, there's just zero evidence of that demographically or substantively. These were not homes from which militant activity was taking place. The human shield so-called claim could have some validity in the context of, say, and probably does in some contexts of, say, Hamas has militarized a civilian area and is firing rockets out of it or is hiding in it, right? That could have
Right.
a validity in the sense that could alleviate some of the responsibility for Israel's casualties that they're inflicting. If you're simply bombing homes because you think maybe one Hamas guy is there and killing, one of the more shocking figures was on average when one civilian was killed, 14 members of his family were killed with him. 14.
Right.
When you're doing that, there's no human shields issue. There's no population density issue either. All these excuses are irrelevant if you're making the autonomous decision, Israel's total air supremacy, to repeatedly bomb homes. And
Right.
also, in most cases, there wasn't even a Hamas guy in the home. The Air Wars found a 99-1 in the airstrikes they surveyed ratio of civilians to combatants killed. Now, that could be revised down. I think that's entirely possible, but not hugely. Maybe 95-5, maybe 97-3. My own demographics analysis found at least 90% of those were killed are civilians. So this was mass murder under the laws of war, and there's nothing like it, by the way, in the 21st century for bombing. Nothing like it.
Real quick, I want to share with everyone. This was actually kind of stunning to me. This was the Israeli. Sorry, I don't know how to quite zoom in on that. This was the Israeli. There we go. These were their pictures that they put up. This was 7 days after October 7th, 5 days. So already you can see right here in the pictures shared by Israel's own air defense or Air Force, these are the, just kind of wanton, indiscriminate bombing. And this was, 5 days out to really give people an example. It was never, in my opinion, ever targeted. There's no way you can say that this was targeted. No, it's just, and this is not, these pictures again are posted by the Israeli Air Force. They are not posted by private citizens or journalists in Gaza. These were bragging posts.
Yes,
it's I think it really shows the shocking disregard a lot of Westerners have for Arab lives. That when you sort of take to make a sort of analogy, to imagine if there was a someone who shot up a school and the police bombed the entire school to kill that person in New York or something, people would be horrified. They'd be like, you can't kill 200 kids because of that. But when it's Arab kids, of course, this excuse, well, maybe we're getting a terrorist, is allowed.
Right. That's a really good idea. I think you should do that.
Okay, so so I brought that up because this was actually the first. So the Israeli Air Force tweeted that out on the 12th of October, and I said Israel has dropped more bombs on the Gaza Strip in the last 5 days than America dropped on Afghanistan in an entire year. And
this, we're talking about 2023, right? Not 2024.
Right. No, so that was actually comparing, I believe it was the 2018 numbers in Afghanistan to, it was really heavy bombardment in Afghanistan. It was it was 6,000 bombs that they were bragging about dropping, which was just a ridiculous amount. And you got to think, we dropped bombs all over the country of Afghanistan, which is a massive country. And obviously, they were targeted. It was in certain areas and whatnot. But this idea, this 25 by 6 mile strip, and you're dropping 6,000 bombs in a single week. And now, obviously, we're 14 months in. It's well over 100,000.
Speaking of the American comparison you're drawing, Mel, in 25 days of bombing in Gaza, Israel killed over 1,200 women that Air Wars identified. That is 3 times more than the United States killed in 13 months of bombing Raqqa and Mosul combined in 25 days.
Wow.
So when John Spencer says that our military is less moral than Israel, he is essentially defaming our military as genociders and also absurdly wrong on the facts, like preposterously wrong.
For people who don't know, John Spencer is an Israeli sycophant. He is a hired He is a hired mouthpiece for the IDF. He has some kind of contract with West Point. I don't actually think he's a professor there. I think he teaches like on a
tactical or technical level,
right,
maybe. I don't know, but that's.
I think he more gives seminars, but
Yeah.
But specifically, he's kind of like the guy that they call in as their quote unquote expert to kind of say, oh no, everything's on the up and up, and he is one, along with countless Republican traitors, as far as I'm concerned, who love to push the idea that that the IDF is the most moral army in the world, in the history.
There are also plenty of Democratic traitors too. John Fetterman, Richie Torres.
I rail about the Democrats, all the time on everything else.
Yeah, they're horrible on this too. But I really think, though, and this is something I've made a point on, you don't have to get into technical minutia too much on this. You don't have to talk about for October 2020. You don't have to talk about population density. You don't have to talk about human shielding. They made the decision to repeatedly bomb non-militarized homes over and over and over again, liquidating entire multi-generational families. On average, 15 family members per bombing that killed a single person. On average, 6 children dying per one woman dying in the bombing. So in other words, grandmothers and mothers being killed with grandchildren and children. And by far, not even close, the most women and children and civilians killed in a month of bombing in the 21st century. And I might add, more civilians killed in this 25-day period than have died in all Palestinian terrorism, including October 7th, the Intifadas, the Arab Revolt in the 30s, the Hebron massacre, and all Palestinian terrorism combined in a century.
You mean Israeli victims or Jewish victims?
Right, no, Israeli, Jewish,
terrorism.
right. So like October, people who were targeted by Palestinian terrorists on the Intifada and the suicide bombings in, more in 25 days than all Israeli victims in over a century. So it is clearly mass murder. Now, just talking about this being mass murder, which it obviously is, even if you don't think it's intentional by the reckless disregard standard, it's obviously murder. I think, and by the way, it is intentional because we know that the Israelis were planning at this time in the first 2 weeks of the war to starve to death the Palestinians. Bob Woodward's book talks about it, until they capitulated, until Hamas surrendered or so on. So why don't we believe that they were willing to kill them, the civilians, by bombing, if they were willing to kill them by starvation, which the record shows they were. They blocked all aid from coming in the first 2 weeks. So it's just an open and shut case of mass murder through the aerial campaign in October 2023.
Yeah.
Genocide's more complicated because there's a specific intent. We'll talk about that later. But
I mean, in domestic law, you have, reckless crimes are actually, pretty severely punished. Like if you walk into a crowd and you just shoot a gun up in the air for fun, and you kill 2 people with the bullets, even if your intent wasn't to kill them, you can go to prison for a very long time. So even if it is just reckless disregard, which I don't think it is, and I know you don't think it is, that's still a very heinous crime.
Yeah, and it's murder under the laws of war, most importantly. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Right. So the Air Wars, they're just focusing on October, and this is where they came to their conclusion just from using that data.
Oh, pardon me. They have not. They are very technical in nature, and they should be. They don't talk about genocide work.
Okay.
I've concluded genocide from this, but they haven't. Just to clarify.
Oh, can you also say who Air Wars is? Like, how are they considered? Their reputation considered?
Yeah, their reputation is impeccable in the field of casualty counting. The United States has had some problems with them over the years, but on balance relies extremely heavily on their work. I think it was 70% of our own civilian casualty assessments in the campaign against ISIS, the airstrikes we were doing against the Islamic State, were drawn from Air Wars. So it's a heavily relied upon source by the U.S. government. And well-regarded.
Is it it's a nonprofit, or not a nonprofit, but a non-governmental organization?
Yeah, it's an NGO. It doesn't mean all NGOs are bad, Mel. Don't. I'm just joking, of course.
I know.
But really, though, I will make a real appointment, though, and I think you'd agree with this, Mel. Yeah, some of these NGOs have Air Wars doesn't get involved in politics, but You know, a lot of NGOs do good work in the world.
A good purpose, they do.
Yeah, like they fight. Some fight human trafficking. Some fight. Look at like these groups like Amnesty and Human Rights Watch. Even if you don't agree with them on I don't agree with them on immigration, right? I don't even. But who else would count casualties in war? Who else would be holding account the U.S. military and all these other institutions in Israel? My God, if not for these guys. So they're a great group, and they're extremely well respected. You know, they're cited by United Nations. They rely upon by our own military, and they're one of these gold standards of casualty counting in war. They're just a leader in the field, really.
Yeah. So they're focusing on casualties caused directly by actions of the IDF. Now,
airstrikes specifically, yeah.
Specifically, right? And so we know from, you know, obviously anybody that has studied war or whatnot, that you have these secondary deaths as well, right? And so those are going to be caused by starvation, by missed medical treatments, disease, all of these things, right? So none of the deaths that are being counted right now are actually from any of that, right? All of the deaths, the 45,000 number that we hear, and it's important for people to remember that, because number one, a lot of times the number doesn't change, right? So I think the numbers.
Yeah, it's been 45,000 for like 6 months.
Right. So we have to remember, number one, that they have destroyed basically all of the facility and capability of the health ministry in Gaza to actually count and keep track of people, right? It's just sheer chaos. They blew up the Bureau of Records. They blew up every governmental office that would have any kind of actual hard concrete. And then, of course, if they can't provide, like the exact weight and, third birthday party information, then they'll just say.
I'll make a point here, though. Their data. So there were some decent, serious people that I regard as serious who were skeptical of these data and aren't anymore. So two examples I give are my co-author Mike Spaggett and also Gabriel Epstein, who's kind of a neocon think tank guy, but actually is like one of the 1 in a million of neocons who was serious. I actually talked to Gabe on the phone this morning. So the problem that with the MOH, as for the reasons Mel just outlines, their infrastructure was just decimated, and so for months they had to like make up like sham IDs to identify people, especially if families were killed together. So people were like, "Hey, these aren't the Loon algorithm compliant," and so forth. Now, months later, as they've had time to go through all of these deaths, and as their system came back, at least for a period, they have identified over 99% of these. They're all Loon algorithm compliant. They're all Israel issued ID cards they have. These are real fatalities. And let me make a point. The serious people like Mike Spaggett and Gabriel Epstein who are skeptical of this are no longer skeptical. But go ahead.
Right. So this is, and again, this is bare minimum. This is what the MOH can prove, pretty much, like you said, to 99.9%. This is, in my opinion, and I'm not afraid to go out on a limb and say it. This is a gross undercount. In ways that we probably cannot even possibly imagine. I would not be shocked at all if this was a 200 or 300% undercount, because you simply cannot drop 100,000 bombs on an area that's 25 by 6 miles. A landmass that's that small an area, and not just have catastrophic.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to stay away from that. Let me make a point here.
Isn't catastrophic, but obviously.
No. I understand everything you're saying, and look, I don't know how many indirect deaths there are. I just don't get involved in that conversation. But I'm sure it's the actual, and frankly, direct deaths. So we know from the MOH and other sources that you mentioned 45,000, over 10,000 people, mostly women and minors, again, are buried under the rubble. And the indirect deaths, we just don't have. There was this estimate of Lancet. I just want to be very careful, because I have vetted the MOH fatalities data. I've checked whether they include natural deaths. They don't. We know they don't include natural deaths because there would be far more elderly among the dead if they did. There would be also overrepresentation of babies under 1 compared to, and there is not, right? Because they do not include natural deaths. They're real deaths. Those things we can say. In terms of, we just don't have any good studies like that have direct evidence of natural deaths. But I will say this: if you have people whom you're making walk across the strip to the safe zone, away from the safe zone when it's bombed and whatever. And they're living in unheated tents. I mean, it's commonsensical that you're going to have a lot of, sadly, deaths that haven't been counted. And then also direct deaths. There are many direct deaths that air wars. I can't remember the exact figure. This was an earlier study they did, but they found many direct deaths from just October 2023. So when the infrastructure is more intact, that the MOH missed. I can't remember the figure. I should know this, but it was at least many hundreds in just October 2023 of direct deaths, so bombing that the MOH missed. So we are, we are getting under control.
You guys keep it. I'm saying, me, I don't care. I'll go out on the limb.
Yeah.
It's but I appreciate that you all. So again, we're sitting at 45,000, and people need to keep in mind that the ability.
The figure is for sure higher. We can say that figure is definitely lower.
Direct is definitely higher. We don't know what it is, and because the standard, in my opinion, is just so high that they have to clear. And even then, it doesn't matter. Even then, you'll still have these, these ghouls who will dismiss you immediately.
Right.
Oh, well,
of course.
Numbers, and so.
Hollywood.
Well, Israel can disprove these. Here's the thing: the Gaza Ministry of Health. As a researcher, one thing that's very important to me before I take anyone seriously, whether the U.S. government, whether you're the Ministry of Health, whether you're Israel, is transparency. Right? So the Ministry of Health in Gaza has released over 99% of the names they have are completely identified at this point, right? 1. 2, they have corrected mistakes when you make them. And some of these Hezbollah people are like, oh my God, ha, 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 this person's age was wrong. Well, if they're correcting it, that's the mark of honesty. Like they're correcting errors. That is what I do that all the time on Twitter. That's what a serious researcher does. You will make mistakes. You're human. And look at the context. Right? You correct them. And they've corrected them.
Right.
Another thing is some of their mistakes increase the number of make their data look worse than it would from the perspective of trying to make it look like more. Like for example, they've miscounted some women as men by accident, right? And people never focus on.
That's not to. I mean, people say women and children because I think generally speaking, it's very unlikely those people are militants. But a lot of men aren't either. So
for sure. So I've been very precise in this. So first of all, it's possible that some older boys are militant. I mean, again, I accuse these people of genocide, so I'm not defending them, but it is quite possible that a small percentage of older minor boys are militants. And my analyses have always taken that into account. But the other thing that you mentioned is when they say men, this includes middle-aged men, who are very unlikely to be, they could be, right? It's possible. It's not like a 10-year-old where we know they aren't, but men in their 50s and 60s, if you look at the historical fatalities data, are very unlikely to be combatants.
Yeah.
So, the overall figures point to a shocking proportion. The figures I got, I won't go into all the methodology, but you guys can read it. For Action on Armed Violence, which I wrote, was the range for the war as a whole was in between 2.8 to 1 and 9.6 to 1, which is, in any case, proves Israel a liar with their claim of 1 to 1. But that is like all of the theoretical ranges I could come up with statistically were within that. Like there's nothing more generous to Israel than 2.8 to 1. And that's quite unlikely.
Just so people know that he's talking about 2.81 civilians killed per militant.
Right. The lowest possible. And then the highest possible I came up with is 9.6 to 1 for the war as a whole. This is the war as a whole. For October, Air Wars says 99 to 1. I think that's quite plausible. It could be a little lower maybe, but October, I think, was definitely above 90 to 10.
99 to 1?
For the incidents they surveyed, it was 99 to 1 in October. They wouldn't, for the war as a whole, say 99 to 1 because October, there's just, if you look at the demographics data, something just very sinister is going on in October. I mean, the percentage of women, the percentage of children, the percentage of men who are elderly, the percentage of men who are middle-aged, they just are not like the highest theoretical level of combatants I could come up with is like 10%. And that's very unlikely because it's, again, we're talking about the highest theoretical limit. So I think 95%, 97%, even 99 are all very plausible for October.
So I think it's really, go ahead, Mel. I'll go after you. I was going to say, I think it's very important to talk about this report by Andrew Fox, which has been going around on Hasbro Twitter anyway, and claims that the Ministry of Health has drastically overcounted civilian deaths in order to demonize Israel and stir up anti-Semitism. And a lot of people are taking this seriously. So I think we need to talk about that. And Andrew Fox, I don't remember his exact biography, but he served in the IDF, or do you guys know off the top of your heads what he?
Let me look him up.
I mean, he's a very ideological, hasn't had an agenda very apparently.
All right. So he is a former soldier, a research fellow.
Soldier, that's vague. Soldier where?
Not for the IDF. He was in the British military.
He wasn't. Okay.
Military, a bachelor's in law and politics, some war studies, master's dissertation on strategy in the Middle East, psychology, a master's study on he's a sports fan. This is kind of vague. He looks like he's some kind of soldier.
Yeah. The funny thing though is, guys, he calls himself a specialist in the Middle East and disinformation, and he is a specialist in disinformation. We have to get into
that. You mean in propagating it?
Yeah. I mean,
so Andrew was working for who hired him to do this study?
Oh, it was like something Jackson. It was an institute.
Yeah, it's like a neoconservative thing. It's kind of the equivalent of the Foundation for Defense of Democracy, or like the American Enterprise Institute, only like a lot dumber. Douglas Murray used to be a fellow there. It's this kind of clique, I think you understand the type of people.
And they clearly have an ideological motive. They're not like, you would not compare their level of neutrality to air wars. Let's put it that way.
No. I mean, or competence. Like competence is an issue too. Like again, AEI is an example of a group, or Washington Institute, where Gabriel Epstein, who, by the way, Gabriel Epstein is going to debunk. I mean, he'll be much more polite than I would be, because they're on the same team. But Gabriel Epstein even has worked for a neoconservative think tank in the United States, but is a statistically savvy guy, is apparently co-authoring a piece with Mike Spagat debunking the Fox rubbish, which I like, because we can then say, look, Gabriel Epstein of the Washington Institute, which is really neocon, he says this is bullshit. So, that'll be a good kind of ref.
But give us your brief rundown of why it's bullshit.
I looked at it. I spent so much time with Spencer back in February when he gave his take. I mean, I'm talking about I spent hours and hours arguing with to the point where I was like, I just can't do this. So I gave a 1-over on the Fox report and was like, I have no energy for this whatsoever.
Yeah, I know it's difficult. Yeah, it's difficult.
Just done. I have gotten to the point where I've started to just get really kind of ugly, kind of,
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I understand the exasperation. I mean, some of these people, I'm not saying Fox, but like some of these people really do belong in prison. Like with what they're trying to lie to cover up a genocide.
And the rest of them a lot of them that actually do believe it, they belong in padded.
Exactly. I think that's the division we have to make on this. But I'm happy to talk about it, guys. It's just so it's a stampede of errors, but then there also is just kind of general theme. So general theme.
What was the main claim? Because that was the headline.
The main claim is that the Ministry of Health data are not to be relied on. That's really the main claim,
and that they've been purposely inflated to make people anti-Semitic.
To make people as a propaganda campaign against Israel. And some of the worst people on the continent, and both continents, Europe, United States, all continents in the world really, have been celebrating this. I mean, Bild, one of the top German publications, they had one of their editors, Christopher Buhl, was trumpeting this. And I read German, and I read the German press, so I was like, guys, you're smarter than this. Like, Germans are supposed to be smart. What is this rubbish? You can't. This is such low-hanging fruit. But look, here's one big problem. There's so many problems, it's really difficult to start with, but I'll bring up one. The lack of transparency for his data. He's relying on secret data throughout the report. So here's what I mean by that. He relies on the Gaza population register, which is maintained by Israel, and he uses it to try to discredit the Ministry of Health data. But these data aren't publicly available. So, like, again, research transparency is very important for researchers, because you have to be able to check people's footnotes, or you can't really do anything to peer review or evaluate. And none of this is public. Like, for example, Air Wars lists the name of every person they class as civilian, literally all of them, right? That's transparency. And I'm sure Israel at some point will find one person they got wrong and then like say, oh, they're all fake. But that's what serious people do nevertheless. You're going to make mistakes. You got to be transparent. That's what serious academics do. And Fox relies on this population registry to make all these claims. And we have no transparency, right? We don't know because we can't access this. Here's another thing he relies on. There's the supposed list of 10,000 combatants Israel has killed. And Fox references that. Again, this isn't public. We don't know that. My view, in fact, what I basically know is that if this were released, we'd find that this is like, I don't want to give a specific figure, but a very large number of people on this list are civilians. And the reason I say that too is I don't know if you guys saw the Haaretz report from yesterday. Yeah, okay, so they're murdering people in these free fire zones and counting all of them as.
And Haaretz, for people who don't know, it's an Israeli newspaper. It's considered very far left. Right. I don't know if I agree with that character.
It's their paper of record as well.
Yeah,
is it? It's like the New York Times of Israel or something.
It is. Yeah, it's Mel is correct. It's an interesting spot because Israel's gotten so extreme that Haaretz is like so far right that I wanted to say far then God, is Mel going to take that as a pejorative, but that they've gotten so far, they're so off the spectrum that Haaretz is like Hamas now, but Haaretz reported anyway that soldier after soldier says, we're killing people in these free fire zones and then counting them as combatants. So that's why Israel isn't releasing it. And so the two problems with this is, first of all, as a researcher, you cannot rely on private information. You have to disclose it, right? Or we can't do anything about it. We can't check your footnotes and we can't seriously engage it. That's the first problem. The second problem is he's just credulously believing all these Israeli claims. Like, why would we believe when we have public reporting that they're inflating their death toll by counting people they murder in these free fire zones as combatants? Why would we believe this list of 10,000 people, which, by the way, he refuses to release because I guess I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but there's weird things going on. He went on some kind of tour of Israel. Like, he got wined and dined a bit. I don't want to speculate beyond that, but
as a free speech person, I really struggle with this because I'm like, you should be able to say what you want, but this is kind of like fraud or defamation, like one of those exceptions.
You can say it's fraud. Foxes, Foxes. I'm perfectly happy to call this report fraud.
And it's fraud, not even for like the purpose of making money, but it's for committing murder. So it's like worse
genocide. No, it's worse than murder. Murder is Luigi. Murder is like the batting cages with these guys. These guys are genociders. Like so, but here, and then there also are just some really ridiculous mistakes. So, for example, and by the way, I'm going to post all of my data on, I think, Twitter even, because why not, right? Especially if I'm because I'm calling him out for this, and I'm like, I'll be as transparent as I can. But for example, he relies on just miscounting of the MOH data. He claims at one point that a majority of people in the MOH data are males 15 to 45. In fact, the actual figure is 13,000 in the list he uses is 13,036 out of 34,344. Another problem is he uses an outdated list. Like the list, the latest list where everybody is identified is 40,717. He uses like outdated data, which is really weird. And lazy because in October. So here's what happened. They released a new list.
It's not lazy. It's malevolent. It's
who knows? I don't know. I'm just talking about what I know. But it's very strange that he would use outdated data when this 40,000 plus list was released in October. Right.
Another thing from my look at it was that he was like, he didn't understand that people remain on lists for treatment even after they're dead. So he was these people are still alive, but they're counted in the death. So they're still on the list. So this proves that it's all a lie, but that's just how it works. It's also basic negligence, but it's not real negligence. It's like trying to find a way
it's manipulating the data.
Exactly.
And not even the real data. It's taking a purposefully dunce view of the data.
Purposefully dunce.
It is. These people are not stupid. I do
not believe
for 1 second.
It depends. I don't know. Maybe Fox. I don't know.
Sometimes you do actually run into some really dumb people, but I don't know. I'm pretty cynical. I don't think
some are malicious.
I think that they are malicious, but part of me when I was reading this Haaretz article yesterday, it really kind of struck me like did they rush this Fox? Because the Fox report was so sloppy to me. It was just so like, what? Like, you're just reading through it. It was like, it was so easy to just kind of poke holes. It was like, how is any serious person, like, why would you attach your name to this? It's really stupid. It's so easily.
Yeah, but it's not meant to be serious.
Right, because they got the headline that they wanted.
Yeah. Exactly. It's functioning exactly as it's supposed to, which is to allow them to say, no, it's not, this isn't happening.
Right. So
right. I'll make a couple other points about, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say, this one was, this is a testimony from an IDF soldier given to Haaretz.
Go ahead, yeah.
It says another fighter describes witnessing 4 unarmed people walking normally, spotted by a surveillance drone. Despite clearly not appearing as militants, a tank advanced and opened fire with its machine gun. Hundreds of bullets, he recalls. 3 died immediately. The sight haunts me, he says, while the 4th survived and raised his hands in surrender. We put him in a cage set up near our position, stripped off his clothes, and left him there, the soldier recounts. Soldiers passing by spat on him. It was disgusting. Finally, a military interrogator came, questioned him briefly while holding a gun to his head, and then ordered his release. The man had simply been trying to reach his uncles in northern Gaza. Later, officers praised us for killing terrorists, and I couldn't understand what they meant. And so
it's Hamas's fault. Hamas made them do that.
Yeah.
Right. So he goes on, and I know people aren't going to like it when I say this, but stuff like that. It's not obviously the victims. It's just awful, right? Obviously it is. There is no excuse. There is no, and justice must be done for them. But what this does to the psyche of the soldiers, even if they're not participating, if they're just watching, this rots the soul, and it rots the soul of your country. Okay, especially a country like Israel where everyone is invested in their military.
Yeah.
When this is so commonplace, this kind of just barbarism, it will rip apart the fabric of their country. And so something that I've always thought, even, as obviously I've had issues with Israel for years for a variety of reasons, is that people who actually care about Israel would want an end to this. They should never have supported this to begin with, because if you actually cared about the country, you would care about the psyche of the country. You would care about the morale and the ability of the people to stand proud in their principles. And you would never allow them to basically, I've long kind of likened it to having a drug addict child and then just giving them all the money they want.
Of course. It's very short-sighted. I mean, and a lot of what's going on now is about Bibi Netanyahu's political aims. I mean, he's trying to, he's in political trouble, and he's hoping that this war allows him to evade that.
I mean, it's up to us. I mean, frankly, though, guys, like, we have to make it. Look, there's nothing in history that's guaranteed. I mean, as absurd as it is, we probably would all rip all of our hair out within the next few years if this happens. But there's no law of physics that would prevent them from making the John Spencer version of history what takes hold. I don't think that'll happen. I think there's too much freedom, but we have to be active. We have to be speaking the truth. And we have the evidence. I mean, just to quote the article you just cited, I mean, this is the commander in one of this kill zones. This is an Israeli officer this was his policy. Every woman is a scout or a man in disguise. Anyone on a bicycle can be killed. This is Haaretz. I mean, yeah, they're a genocidal, murderous army. And it's I think part of the problem people have with that is they just think and this is sort of the problem, I think, of the center left. They think if something is Western or Western adjacent or Western sponsored, like whatever we want to call Israel, that there's limits to how bad they could be. They couldn't actually commit genocide. Right. There's like a cognitive block. If they read this article about how, for example, suppose Russia had for a month bombed homes, essentially only homes, had a program called Where's Daddy to this effect. They called it Where's Daddy, and like shattered all records for a month of bombing, killing women, children, and civilians. I mean, there's no one in the West who would say that isn't genocide. And yet with Israel, these people on the center left who are really the objects of my greatest scrutiny, like people like Destiny or Loner Box or in the streaming world even, just have a cognitive block. Yeah. I think that was at the beginning. I think now they're just consciously lying because they've seen enough that they know murder is going on. Right. But at the beginning, I think a lot of people in the center left, and maybe even low information people now, they have just a cognitive block where they cannot process that a Western-oriented state could commit genocide or murder, right? So it's just,
And
it
I
can be
think
bad, but it can't be at that level. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's not just, it's also Israel gets special treatment. And I,
Yeah.
I see this a lot. Like, there are a lot of people who just can't believe it. It's not like the state for the people who suffered the Holocaust can't possibly be doing the same thing. And there's this, I encounter this with a lot of people I know. It's just, they can't grasp the concept of Israel being the villain. They have such guilt about the Holocaust, even Americans. That it's like they have to be the good guys. And I think that's just so embedded in so many people's psyches that that's a bit of what's going on.
Yeah, that as well. But just to make a couple more points, because I think we should talk about just a few more points on the Fox travesty. So, for example, he makes a big deal about the fact that I want to get a few of the lies in because they're so obvious. Like the Fox mentions that a little over 100 men are mislabeled as women, and if that were only happening one way, you might say, well, they may be trying to inflate, but he just does not mention that there also are scores of women mislabeled as men, which just promotes the inference that these are accidents. There also are cases where like little children, like babies, are mislabeled as one gender or the other. If you look at the Arabic names, which obviously are accidents, because if you mislabel a baby, you're not gonna, a 2-year-old is gonna be a civilian whether he's male or she's female. So so that's an example of a
not
lie.
According to Laura Loomer.
Oh yeah. I mean, that one is, oh my goodness. That person is. And then just also, and I'll talk about this in the piece I published, but just misunderstanding of like really basic statistical concepts like sampling bias. So, for example, he thinks that if one source of data the MOH gets for fatalities is different in terms of the percentage of men than another, that there must be some kind of fraud going on. No, it's just sampling bias. Like, for example, it seems that women are more likely to report the deaths of men really quickly than men are to report the deaths of their spouses. And that could just be to collect inheritance. I mean, there's plenty of explanations for this. So he wants to jump to lies when other explanations are much more plausible. And he also engages in lying, as I said, lie by omission with the gender issue. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm not being critical enough, but I just am astounded that they are able to keep record of anything.
Yeah. No, they're doing a good job. I mean, really.
They are. I mean, I think they're doing an outstanding job given the circumstances. Yeah. I can't imagine personally not crumbling completely. I know
right.
I know that's not an option, so God bless them for that. But I think that they do a pretty fantastic job, and the fact that this is what you have to nitpick with is just ridiculous.
It is, and the key point again is to go back to transparency. They are releasing names, ID numbers, ages. You can check them. Israel can check them. Apparently, Andrew Fox can check them too, because he somehow has access to this secret register from Israel. Israel has never publicly released a list with any significant number of the combatants it claims to have killed or civilians. And we also know they're lying from public reporting with the free fire zones where they massacre people, including children, and then count them as civilians. So to believe Israel, it's just, even Fox must know, it's really research 101 that if a source is offering zero transparency, as Israel is for its estimates, you just don't trust it until you have evidence, right? But yet he takes it as like holy scripture.
Right. Yeah. Well, to me, it's not a serious research effort. It's a propaganda effort. It's doing its work in that regard. But let's, before we run out of time, let's talk about why, what your reasons are for concluding that this is a genocide or maybe a genocide.
I will share the, let's pull her up real quick. Boom. There we go. Definitions. Can you read that?
Yes. Yeah. So, you guys can read, or I'm happy to read it too, and I can talk about why I think that it meets the definition.
Okay, so this is from the UN, and it is the definition: Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. So in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. As such, one, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction in whole or in part. imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So this is, in order to meet the definition, you have to do one of these things, correct?
Right. You have to kill. And how this is, and as Jenin knows, statutes or conventions, how the language is important, but also is what's very important is how courts have interpreted it. And so there's a couple extra points I would say. Implicitly, there's a numerical standard. No one's ever going to say what it is, because it would be absurd to say, okay, if you kill 3,000, it's not genocide. If you kill 3,001, it is. That's absurd.
Well, but that's what old Piers Morgan was saying last night.
Oh, interesting. I didn't see that one.
Interview with,
oh boy,
Candace Owens.
Yeah.
She said it was genocide, and he said, well, they haven't killed all 2 million.
That's a strange definition. But what I would say how this has been interpreted, if you look at like International Military Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia or Croatia versus Serbia, the case law on genocide is you have to decimate a group. There has to be a certain number of killing. Like in the case of Srebrenica, it was 8,000. So that was enough. That was seen as enough. 8,000 was seen as enough. And it has to be done through murder is the only thing that's been recognized, even though there are other cases like sterilization where in the convention, but murder is what's been recognized, right? So maybe we'll get in the future genocide through sterilization, but what we've had so far only is murder. And it has to be done with an intent to like decimate a group, to destroy them in whole or in part. So I'll go through why I think Gaza is a case of genocide. So the first thing which we mentioned is we need to get to murder. We need to get to lots of murder. We have that in October 2023. We have that under the laws of war.
Sorry to stop you, but so your detractors would say it's not murder because they're not intending to kill people. So like that's the sort of starting point. If there's collateral damage, that's not murder.
Absolutely. So under the laws of war, it's true that collateral damage is not murder, and even disproportionate collateral damage is not necessarily murder. In the case of Israel in October 2023, there's no precedent to the level of destruction they were exacting in terms of killing women, children, civilians in a month of bombing. They were bombing homes over and over and over and over again. So at the very least, I think it was intentional, but at the very least, Israel's conduct would express not just disproportionality, but what we call in the law, as you know, Jenin, reckless disregard.
Reckless,
right?
yeah.
And under the laws of war,
I was going to say in New York State, where I practiced, at least reckless disregard is a form of murder.
Right, under the laws of war too.
Yeah.
So it isn't just you're not doing enough. Proportionality is you're not doing enough to protect civilians. You don't care enough. Reckless disregard is you don't give a shit at all. And if you're bombing homes over and over and over again, killing multi-generational families, like shattering all records for 21st century bombing, you're clearly exhibiting reckless disregard. I think it was worse than that. I think it was intentional too, because for many reasons. But if you look at the starvation strategy in the first 2 weeks, they were blocking all food, water, and medicine from coming in. In Bob Woodward's book, he reveals how Blinken and Biden were trying to stop them from doing this, and they do stop them. The one good thing that these horrible monsters did in the war, but they clearly had the intention to starve the population until they capitulate. Why is that relevant? Because if they're willing to murder them by starvation, they're willing to murder them by bombing, and they were bombing them at the same time. So regardless, murder is established by reckless disregard. I think it was intentional too. We can talk about other reasons for that, but murder isn't enough, right? Murder is not enough for genocide. You need to have a desire to decimate or destroy a group. The reason I believe this was genocide is they want to ethnically cleanse Gazans. They want to destroy Gaza as a society. They're razing buildings. They're destroying civilian infrastructure with no justification. You see these controlled demolitions where they're doing selfies and they destroy a university for no reason at all, right? And we know they have total operational control over it because you couldn't carry out a controlled demolition without that. The so-called general's plan being implemented in northern Gaza intends to ethnically cleanse northern Gaza. They want to resettle northern Gaza. In the early weeks of the war, they clearly wanted the Gazans to go to Sinai. That was essentially the policy of Netanyahu and so on. And so I believe they did many things to them, including murder, with the intention of getting them to run out of Gaza, trying to ethnically cleanse them, and trying to destroy Gaza as a society, sort of replace Gaza. It isn't the final solution. It isn't they're trying to round up every single person and kill them. They're not doing that. But they murdered in order to ethnically cleanse and destroy the society. And I'll say a very important case pending in the not the Supreme Court, in the ICJ. Yeah, I know, like, come on, Matthew, you've got to be more intelligent than that. But pending in the ICJ right now is is the case of the Gambia versus Myanmar, and this case involves the Rohingya genocide, what scholars are increasingly regarded as a genocide. And that genocide involved the Myanmar military murdering the Rohingya Muslims in an attempt to get them to run. There was no final solution. They didn't want to wipe them out biologically. They didn't want to kill every last one, but they wanted to make them run. They wanted to ethnically cleanse. The indications are this is going to be ruled a genocide. That in the Gambia versus Myanmar case, the Myanmar will be held responsible for the genocide of the Rohingya. If that happens, if the precedent is established that mass murder by a state to ethnically cleanse is genocide, I believe we'll also see the Gaza genocide recognized as such, because that's what I think the evidence overwhelmingly shows happened. Mass murder as a state policy with one of the goals, or many goals. They want the hostages back. They want Hamas to give up, right? I'm not saying it's the only motive, but mass murder in order to ethnically cleanse. So
what do you think the implications of that are on the U.S.?
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin with that.
Do you think
it's so difficult?
On the U.S. or on the Biden administration?
I think it's both. I think the Biden administration is a historical disgrace for complicity in genocide. I think also we have some responsibility. I'll never stop loving America, but I still haven't come to terms with, I don't think I will for a while, what it means that we were complicitous in genocide. And I just don't know what the political implications of that. I do know, I feel like I don't have solid ground beneath my feet politically. And we can talk about factors that are relevant. The Israel lobby is extraordinarily powerful. Our military would never have, we can criticize our military, but they would, just empirically, they have not behaved like this. No, they wouldn't. Now, you can talk about the Second World War. We directly targeted civilians, the bombing of Cambodia. But if you look at the last half century, we have not, our soldiers have not behaved like. Now, you can talk about rogue soldiers murdering people for sure, but as a system, we haven't. But we're still complicit in it. I don't think the complicity is just peripheral. I think it's very substantive. And I don't think we can just say, oh, the Israel lobby, immensely powerful. But we did this. Our elected president did it.
No, and apathy on the part of the American people to not hold their representatives accountable. We do hold that. I truly believe that what has been done and what our government at this current time stands for is antithetical to everything that America is built on. I believe that they are in fact mutually exclusive. And so I don't ever judge. Obviously, they are related, but these people do not stand. They do not cherish American principles. They don't believe in any of our Bill of Rights. They don't believe in the Declaration of Independence.
I mean, they're willing to suspend the First Amendment to benefit Israel. So there's been so much speech suppression.
I agree that those are very important issues you guys are talking about, but I just think we've reached a level of evil that I just could never have imagined. Even
Saul, let me ask you this:
hapless American. I don't want to whitewash. We've done very. So, for example, the Second World War, I obviously think it's good we won. It's good the West won. We did target civilians deliberately, right? Like the nuclear bombings, the terror bombings. This was not collateral damage, which would have been inevitable in a war like this. Of course, collateral damage. You can't be unrealistic, but they were targeting civilians to make. And the fact that this is still defended is also, I find, very perverse. Like these pseudo edgy people saying, "Ha ha, Dresden." Like, why is it funny that the British in this case mostly, but why is it funny that civilians were targeted and burned alive? I mean, it's not. But regardless, though, we're on a bit of a tangent.
What you actually also see is and I think that we've seen this over and over again. I don't know if it was a switch or not, because I'm not a historian in warfare. But typically, historically, you would see two armies kind of line up, essentially, and they would battle each other out, right? And we saw this in the Civil War, we saw this in the Revolutionary War, and then come into the 20th century, and there was, it seemed like, a lot more targeting of civilians, and you see this in not necessarily World War I, but definitely World War II, and then in Korea, and then Vietnam. And I don't know if it's maybe just the urban sprawl that just, there is no traditional battleground for armies to square off, or if it's just, the advent of guerrilla warfare, or the proliferation of guerrilla warfare, that it's just the natural consequence. But these, I don't know, it's fascinating to see the ways that we would have never really tolerated, I think.
I think the problem with an answer I give it is to be an essay, but I'll give you a very micro answer for the United States. I think the story of the United States military since World War II has been moral improvement. I mean, like the things we did in the Second World War and in Vietnam as well, especially the bombing of Cambodia, I would argue was murder. It wasn't just, with good Kissinger
Right.
hatched
It
out.
was
Yeah,
just
but we
wrong,
haven't been, literally murder under the laws of war, right? But I would argue that, no military is perfect, and we should be harshly critical of the U.S. military too. But I would argue there has been considerable moral progress in terms of how much we care about, like for example, if you look at the campaign against ISIS, even the worst cases like Mosul and Raqqa, like there were serious efforts made to limit civilian collateral damage. I mean, that goes back to Spencer. You know how Spencer makes his argument Mosul was worse? He lies about Israeli figures, and he also attributes thousands of people killed by ISIS to the United States.
To the U.S.
That is the Patriot.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. So this brings us to, I think, our final topic, which is if I think we all agree this is uniquely evil, and it's uniquely evil that the United States supports it. And I think both Mel and I had a similar attitude, although I think we voted for different people, that we could simply not ever support the administration. And Kamala Harris is part of the administration. She's had opportunities to distance herself from President Biden's policies and has not. So I think it's reasonable to attribute what Biden has done to her and her future policies. So I think both Mel and I felt as though we could simply not vote for her. I don't know if Mel ever would have. I was open.
Mel would have been on the Mel was on the bubble before Gaza.
I was. I mean, I don't like the Democrats. I don't like the Republicans. But this is my number one issue right now. I do not believe a country can be funding, morally supporting a genocide. Like, we just can't do that for ourselves and the world. It's just destructive. So I know that you had a difference of opinion, voted for Harris. And so how do you sort of square that with your position on the unique evilness of this situation?
Well, the cheap answer is I mean, it's technically cheap, but it's very cheap. I don't even want to say it. I'm not going to give the cheap answer. I knew this was horrible when it was happening, right? Whatever I may have described it as, I knew it was mass murder and so on when I voted for her. I thought that she would be better on a number of issues I cared about, and that she would also be less bad on Gaza. That's the best answer I can give you. And that's what I conclude. I mean, we'll see what Trump does. He won. I want him to do the right thing. I'm not like some partisan hack. I really don't care. Yeah. By the way, you guys will find this funny. I went the other day, to get a shave, and it was mostly Arabs at the and they all these Arab guys working in the barbershop voted for Trump. So Trump got a ton of Arab votes, and a lot of it was over this, but some of it was over, I think, young men, and also young African American men in some cases, young Hispanic men they don't feel that the Democrats are speaking to them, and they don't like the kind of discourse, the woke discourse. But the best answer I can give you is I agreed with her on more issues than Trump. I feel less concerned about this now because it's just like we're complicit in genocide. But I was concerned at the time about Trump's what I regard as illiberal policies, like this not conceding he lost the 2020 election. But I'm kind of at the point where I don't think he will do things I want, but I really want him to. Right? He's going to be my president. I don't have some. I think people who are so focused on, I want this party to do shitty because I want to have some kind of angle politically to go after them. You're really missing the point. I hope Trump succeeds. The one hope, I don't have much hope for him on this, but the one thing he might do is he might want to end it just because it's a political distraction, which would be great. But the problem, and you guys could answer this maybe, don't you think he might, this is one of the reasons I voted for Harris over him, but what do we think of the West Bank? Isn't Trump promising, like Miriam Adelson, that at least Area C of the West Bank is going to be given to lunatics from Brooklyn, or like David Friedman? Or, I mean, hasn't he promised the annexation of area, or maybe not? I don't know. But
so that was an interesting case. So Haaretz ran that piece back in May, It actually never got any follow-up. And, again, we've already stated, Haaretz is the left-wing media in Israel. And, of course, they want a left-wing administration here in
they
the
favor
US.
Harris.
Right. So when Trump and Adelson were asked on that, of course, they both denied it. Interestingly enough, I actually ran across an article with Jared Kushner. It was an interview of Jared Kushner from 2021, in which I guess Bibi was trying to take advantage of the COVID situation, and he had plans to go into the West Bank and annex in 2020, summer 2020. And Kushner told him, actually, I guess he threw David Friedman out of his office and told him that if Bibi did that, it would be the biggest regret.
Right, I remember reading this, yeah.
Right, and so here recently, Trump again, I guess, reiterated through people that he would not support an annexation. This was just like 2 days ago, I think, and so the language wasn't quite as strong. I think that Donald Trump has a really big ego. And I think one of the things that is very interesting about Trump, and sometimes it's good, and a lot of times if you're a Republican it's bad, is that he really loves to be loved. And he does not, he doesn't have the stomach to be the bad guy. Right? He does not have the stomach like Biden. Biden, 50 years in D.C. is impervious to being called a genocidal maniac. He doesn't care. If you were showing Donald Trump pictures of children with their legs blown off from the bombs that he supplied, I genuinely believe that he couldn't stomach that, right?
He also, I know some people who know him, and they said that he reacted very viscerally, and he said, "I don't like this. I want it to end." Whereas Biden, I listened to an interview with his State Department, someone who worked in his State Department. She said she kept trying to show him the photos, and he said, "I don't want to see this anymore. I don't want to see this." Just like very dismissive. And Harris, maybe Harris isn't a bad person, whatever, at heart. I don't know. But even if she's just dumb like that, you have to be very strong. You have to be very moral to stand up to the forces.
You do.
And I'm not saying Trump is the most moral person in the world. I don't have any illusions. I cried when he got elected in 2016, and I didn't vote for him. I voted.
Believe
for
it or not, I voted. Believe it or not, I voted for. I have to say this. I voted.
You voted for Trump in 2016. Yeah. No, I cried on the subway home after a Hillary Clinton party.
Sorry,
went badly.
Kind of funny.
I've changed a lot. But I voted for Jill Stein just as kind of a statement. Like I live in DC, like my, and I, sort of everyone knew that her main platform was genocide. So I wanted to be like, okay, I want them to know that this is a big issue to a lot of people. I would have voted for Trump if I was in a swing district. Yeah. And I was, I knew Stein wasn't going to win because I'm not an idiot, total idiot. But I hoped he would win, and I was pleased when he did, because I think. I think you cannot reward genocide. You just can't. It's a moral red line.
Look, that's completely sensical. The hope I had with Harris is that some of her personnel, like Phil Gordon, are on the, by DC standards, which is not great, but are on the moderately Israel skeptical side. Like if you look at the people she was surrounding herself with on foreign policy, they were a lot better than, and that's a concern I have with Trump, frankly, that you have Mike Huckabee. I mean, the ambassador to Israel is going to have a role in policy, so it's not just a joke. And then you have Rubio as the Secretary of State. Look, it is the thing about Trump is he has more. Everyone is affected by institutions, right? Even Trump, but he has more independence of action. Because he has this like cult of personality, and because of just his personality, he has more independence of action than the average president. So he could do good on this. I don't think he will, but I'm rooting for him to do it. I really am. I don't care about being right on this. I want the genocide to be punished and for the country to disassociate ourselves from it. And if he does the right thing in ending the war, I'd be very, very pleased with him. So let's hope he does.
Well, on that note, I got to run.
Okay,
that was a good note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk again.
Thank you. Yeah, looking forward to seeing you guys soon. Take care.
Bye.